I'd like to invite to the stage Vinai Kopp. It's a tech day, so I think that Vinai doesn't have to be really introduced to this crowd. And Vinai will tell you a story of the, I would say, the biggest hit of last month. Hyvä. Hyvä, did I pronounce it well? Or it should be Hyvä? Hyvä.
Hyvä.
I will keep working on that. So Hyvä, developer's perspective.
Do I need a... Ah, no. OK. Hey, I'm happy to be here and speaking to people in person again. It's kind of unreal standing here and seeing you. It's like, it feels disconnected in a way, but it's awesome. So thank you, Kuba, for putting this up and inviting me here and everything. It feels almost like a really important step back into real life. OK. So, Hyvä. OK, I've got slides for this. Here we go. OK, a little bit about me. Started work with Magento long time ago. Completely different world back then, right? I mean, if I look around, most of you probably remember that, 2008. So anyway, over the years, I went through a story many of you probably can relate to as well. Not just you here in the room, but also those watching online. I grew kind of frustrated. eBay, Adobe, I don't know, more complexity. I didn't feel very comfortable. But at the same time, there always was this community where I really felt at home and that I really liked, and all these awesome people that I got to know and work with over time. Oops, too early. So anyway, I started shopping around, looking for a different approach to serving my customers as a developer, because that's basically what I am, right? I love programming. That's what I like the most. But after I saw what Willem, who's also here in the audience right there, he created this thing called Hyvä and presented it last year at Reacticon, almost a year ago now. Back in the day, I wasn't really that interested, to be honest, because I thought, it's just another one of these, whatever. Didn't really have a lot of hope left. But after I watched the presentation after the event on YouTube, and Willem was kind enough to give me access to it, and I got to put my hands on it and try it out, I realized this really makes a difference how I can build Magento sites. And I started to really fall in love with the whole product and everything around it again. So, yeah, I love being where I am right now, here as part of the Magento community, and I'm here to stay. So, I want to talk about Hyvä from a developer's perspective, more specifically, a back-end developer's perspective, right? Because especially due to the Luma front-end stack, I kind of didn't want to touch it too much and started working mainly in the back-end. Because previously, I actually did do a fair amount of front-end development. So, wait a minute, I still have to get a hang of this clicker technology, right? So I just want to let you know, I come here with a bit of a bias. I really believe in Magento and in Hyvä. I think it's awesome. It's a game changer. So I bought into the company that Willem created. So I have high stakes in the game here. So I'm kind of biased, right? At the same time, I do want to give you an objective presentation about how it is to work with Hyvä as a developer. So if you go away from here thinking about building something with Hyvä, you can make a choice based on real information here, right? And then you can go with it or not. But I want to give you some value here and not do a sales pitch. So anyway, in case you're not familiar with Hyvä, and it's kind of strange thinking, trying to see things objectively here, because I'm working with it every day now. But what is Hyvä, if you don't know it? It's a brand new Magento front end, and we know it delivers the best developer experience, the best performance, and the best time to market, for a number of reasons. So it's a theme, but unlike any Magento theme you know, it replaces the complete Luma front-end stack. So all the HTML, JavaScript, all the ugly parts, right? Less, require.js, hundreds of requests, ugly JavaScript merging process, all that stuff thrown out, right? William replaced all of that with a very clean, lean, mean stack built of pure HTML5, Tailwind, CSS, and Alpine.js. So basically, the front end that Magento should have had from the beginning, except that back when Magento 2 was released, it wasn't an option because browsers weren't capable of it yet. Nowadays, it's a different story. A lot of what was built into Luma, browsers now can do natively. There's no need to load in megabytes of JavaScript just to make them do what they do, right? Tailwind CSS is pretty much becoming an industry standard. It's hugely popular CSS utility framework. And Alpine.js is a very lightweight wrapper around native JavaScript in a way that makes it easier to manipulate the DOM. The syntax is very similar to Vue.js, so if you're familiar with it, it's basically almost like a drop-in replacement. It's pretty cool. So, Hyvä is a commercial product, right? So it has a $1,000 lifetime license fee, which might seem steep as an entry fee if you're used to other themes you can buy from Magento, but it's more than just a theme, right? And I actually believe this price tag, it being a commercial product, is pretty important because it's a product. Merchants can trust that we are really interested in making it thrive, that we won't just abandon it, right? It's our livelihood. And there will be continued development, right? We will fix bugs, we will continue to improve it and create new features and make it better over time. And you don't only get that product, you also get access to a whole community, to a whole lot of documentation, to a private Slack, which is also a means of direct support. There you get access to all the GitHub repositories for all the different parts that make up Hyvä, right? So it's not just a theme, there's so much more. Okay, so now that you know what Hyvä is, right? So how was it for me? I'll take off my sales hat and put on my developer hat. How was it for me getting started doing Hyvä development, coming from just doing PHP backend development, which I enjoy, but I really had to get used to this idea of a utility CSS framework. I mean, I looked at the different ones when they were released. I kind of understood how they worked, but I never really used one. So using one, I felt a bit like I had to relearn CSS, but only because I wasn't very fluent in CSS to begin with, that is, current CSS. So right now, after a couple of months of working with it, I feel very comfortable, and I'm still learning new stuff, but it feels like CSS, only I can work quicker with it, right? And I don't have to work around quirks as much as working with native CSS. So it's very close, actually. So in all these new concepts that were introduced to CSS since I stopped doing front-end development, like grids, right? Now I feel pretty much at home there. So it's like, to me, it feels like a better CSS, right? And that's me as a backend developer. So all the front-end developers who are watching this probably disagree there, and they say, CSS is so much better, or I don't care. It's actually, for me, it works pretty well. It's not too bad. It taught me a lot how to work with CSS correctly. Now, the other part of the stack is Alpine.js. So how was it getting started with Alpine.js? And going in there, I felt a bit like, okay, let's do this, right? I'll read the documentation because I like documentation, to be honest. It took me about an hour to read it, and it just was a README on GitHub back then. So it took about an hour reading through there. And then I started working with it. And it was so easy, I was kind of shocked. There's a super low entry barrier. It's really super simple, right? So I just started using it, and does it work like this? And yes, it does. So it does exactly what it says it does, and it's really so lightweight and small, it doesn't get in the way. So that was super simple. It really took no time at all for me to get started with Alpine and start doing anything I wanted to, even as a backend developer. That said, I do a fair bit of JavaScript development. So I know JavaScript. I've used React and other stuff, but this is super simple. So there was basically no barrier of entry using Alpine. I really like it a lot. Since then, Alpine 3 has been released, And there's a whole, now it's got a website. Previously there was no website for Alpine.js. Now it's got a website, and there's more documentation and a lot of new features. But still, the core is super straightforward and simple to go and start with if you know JavaScript. Right, so how is my day-to-day work using Hyvä? Well, to be honest, most of the work that I've done so far has been with I'm just looking at the timer here, and I think I'm going a little fast, but I'm not speaking too fast, right? Should be fine. So third-party modules is what I'm working with mostly. Because building Magento sites, one of the biggest assets of Magento is that we have all these modules, all this business logic, all these variants that have been captured, extension providers have built them, agencies and service integrators have built their own pool of modules that we can reuse and adjust as needed for each different project. And that's a huge asset that we have. Now, the big problem here is that these modules were built with Luma compatibility in mind. And if you take out the Luma front-end stack, well, naturally, that part of these modules doesn't work anymore. So, Willem came up with this idea of compatibility modules, right? And what a compatibility module is, basically, if I want to use a module that exists and I want to use it with Hyvä, I need to replace those parts that no longer work. So basically, that means I have to create a bunch of PHPML files and re-implement a bit of JavaScript. Now, because many stores actually use a pretty similar subset of modules, right? There are some modules which are used by, I don't know, in my experience, maybe 80% of all stores. They all use this one and that one of the modules available. And then there's a big long tail, right? So it's kind of a curve like this. Highly used modules, and then there's a long curve, which a lot of modules also just used in one or two sites. But by creating compatibility modules for those modules that are used by almost every Magento site out there, why do we have to replicate that work again and again and again? Once that's work done and we have a compatibility module, it can be reused. So the idea is, if you purchase a Hyvä license, you also get access to the compatibility module repository. And in there, once somebody creates it, you can share it with the community and benefit from all the other compatibility modules others have written. You can also build on top of it. Maybe somebody didn't need the full feature set of a module and just covered part of the compatibility that was needed. Now, if somebody else requires the rest of the compatibility features, well, you can add on top of it. So this way, we share this workload of creating compatibility modules and can reuse the work. And just basic open source, right? Reuse, it's great. And we already have coverage of many of the highly used compatibility modules that are used for many stores. We have a compatibility module tracker, which is a list of issues in a GitLab repository. It's accessible publicly, and any license holder can also create new issues, which are like module requests. So if you need a module, just create a request. There's a little issue template there, and it will be added to this list. And then you can also vote for them by giving it a thumbs up. So whenever there's resources free, we will look at that and start also implementing compatibility modules for highly sought after modules. And at the same time, others can see who wants a specific module and can collaborate on it. Once a module is being worked on, we give it the accepted module. So that means, okay, it will be actually implemented. And then if it's in progress, it gets the progress label. And once it's done, it gets a published label. And some extensions actually work out of the box, either because the vendor already started supporting Hyvä out of the box, and there are quite a number of those, a couple of dozen modules now, or because maybe it only really nicely encapsulated its functionality in pure JavaScript or pure CSS. So it works in both. There are some modules that do that work in Luma and in Hyvä out of the box. Or maybe the module just has backend functionalities, so it doesn't even touch the front end. So then, of course, it works out of the box too, and there are a lot of those modules too. So in that case, they get the compatible tag. And if you click on any of these issues, you can see a bit more information, which features are covered, right, and which might not yet be converted and made compatible. So we really want this to be a collaborative effort and put a lot of work in making this work. And it's great to see that all the people working with us on Hyvä sites are actually picking this up and starting to contribute a lot here. And we're super grateful for that, and it's a lot of fun to see. And we also created a lot of documentation around it and try to help people get up to speed there. So what does it now actually mean, creating a compatibility module? Well, first of all, we can create a skeleton compatibility module. If you want to work on a new module, let us know. All we need is the Magento module name and the composer package name of the original module, and then we run a little script, and we get a repository in our GitLab with the basic setup. There are a number of advantages of using this approach, rather than from starting completely from scratch. So once you have this compatibility module skeleton, the usual first step then is, okay, I'll install the original module and the compatibility module that doesn't do anything yet and reload the browser. And usually the first thing I see is either nothing, or in the browser console I get a require is not defined, because there's no require.js, right? Okay, and then I start copying over the templates from the original module into the compatibility module and start replicating that functionality. Depending on the amount of JavaScript, usually that means I inline all the code that got required through datamage init or xmagento init, or inline require calls. All that gets inlined. And in my experience, the amount of code that's required is usually reduced to about a third using the Alpine and Tailwind stack, compared to the original implementation with require.js and knockout and all the old Magento crap. So by using Hyvä, code drastically shrinks. It's not as much work creating the same functionality in Hyvä as it is to originally write it with the Magento stack. There also are a lot of knockout templates, so just .html templates, right, that are used in Magento. And most of the time, I inline those too. And if possible, I just render them with PHP. The only time it really made sense to put that into knockout templates is if there's personalized information, customer-specific information that's being rendered, right? That's why it was front-end specific. And even then, I can put it into a normal PHP template and just populate it with some Alpine.js models or whatever. So those also get inlined. And then, of course, I have to decide, okay, I have this functionality in the original module. Well, this part, especially the interaction with the DOM, I tend to just use Alpine. And if it's something else, network requests, whatever, GraphQL, I normally just use plain old native JavaScript. It can do so much nowadays, right? We don't need to use all these layers like jQuery that used to help a lot, but nowadays, we don't really need them anymore. So, and then also, we add the Tailwind classes in there. And by using Tailwind, I have to say, there's such a big ecosystem built around Tailwind. It's awesome to be able to benefit from that. A lot of tooling has been created around it. Tailwind itself is evolving quickly with just-in-time compilation and other tools. There are browser plugins that help a lot working with Tailwind and styling sites, getting a style that exists and redeclaring it with Tailwind classes is literally just a click in a browser extension, and it copies the required classes into the copy-paste buffer so you can very easily transfer it into your theme. It's amazing the tools that are at disposal there. It's super quick. So, as I said before, we have a lot of documentation. Because I started out as a total noob trying to build compatibility modules, I tried to document everything that I ran into and that I learned. Right? So all of that is now part of the Hyvä documentation there. We also try to make this benefits you get by using the Hyvä module skeleton, improve that. So for now, we have automatic template overrides. That is, if you create a compatibility module for module X, then if you create a template with the same name in the compatibility module, it will automatically override that same template from the original module without having to declare any layout XML, right? So it minimizes the amount of boilerplate you have to write. You basically just copy and adjust, and it just kind of uses the new template if Hyvä is active. And at the same time, that only is used if Hyvä is active, and if Hyvä isn't active, if you're running a Hyvä store view and a regular Luma store view side by side, it still works. So you can have extensions that work for both store views, right? Independently of the theme. Okay, if you have any questions, there's Slack support too. So regarding theming, that's of course still a to-do besides the functionality with JavaScript. I must admit I don't feel as fluent yet as with JavaScript, but I'm getting faster, and it's actually not too bad. I always used to approach theming back a couple of months back with, okay, I hope I can get this modal to look right? It's like, oh, I'm a backend developer trying CSS, dangerous, how can I center this? It wasn't fun. And now it's more like, okay, let's just do this. It's kind of, I can get it done pretty easily. So it feels pretty fast to me. And again, as an experienced front-end developer, your story might be a bit different there, but it works very well for me. And with all the other developers that I interact with, they feel pretty satisfied with it. Another thing that's different in Hyvä compared to traditional Luma themes is that we really embraced this concept of PHP view models that Magento introduced with Adobe, or Magento introduced with version 2.1, right? So what Hyvä brings to the table is a view model registry, which is automatically injected into each template scope in PHP, right? So you can instantiate any view model. Any PHP view model needs to implement the argument interface just like any regular PHP view model that Magento would use as a declared in layout XML. But by using the view model registry, you basically remove the requirement to, templates become like this self-contained pieces of functionality that can be moved around and reused much more easily, right? You're no longer limited to really the whole structure in the layout XML. And they become almost like components on a page, and they become a lot more flexible. Another thing this allows is for view models to provide cache tags for the full page cache. That was previously limited only to block classes, so that's no longer needed. Now, just by creating a view model that implements the identity interface, if that returns an array with some tags, those tags will be part of the full page cache record, or ESI cache record, if you want to use that. So that makes templates a lot more encapsulated and reusable. Right, what I just said. Okay, so what's on the roadmap? We are constantly building in more features. First of all, like just recently, we added the feature that we can use CSS Tailwind classes in backend CMS content. It's compatible with older versions of Magento, so that use a Teeny MCE editor, and it's compatible with Page Builder. So we automatically compile that backend HTML that's required to, it parses out all the CSS classes from Tailwind and generates the CSS that's required to properly format that CMS content without that actually being part of the production CSS bundle, and will render it inline in front of that CMS content on the page, which means you can use any of the pre-built UI library content that's available with Tailwind URI or one of the many free resources on the web. It's basically, okay, this looks nice, this card or whatever, I'll just copy that code, paste it into my CMS content in Page Builder, or use it in a CMS block or page, and it just renders correctly on the front end, exactly like that, without having to kind of create a full, big, less, or, CSS bundle containing additional classes that aren't used anywhere else on the site. We are also increasing coverage of commerce features. We are working with a lot of partners who are doing commerce builds at the moment with Hyvä front end, so they are creating compatibility modules for Adobe Commerce features there. And also, Willem has always said, the module he actually wants to build, the product he actually wants to build, is a UI component library. So something like Tailwind UI, if you're familiar with it, but ready to use in Magento, so you don't even have to add in the PHTML and kind of connect that beautifully designed front-end functionality with the backend logic in Magento, but that's already right there. You just take that as a template, put it right into your site, and it just works. So that will be menus, footers, anything like that. And we just started releasing the first components there, and we'll continue doing that. Like really high quality front-end stuff. So it'll take what's currently the fact, which is it's super fast to build front end with Hyvä, and make that even faster. And we also have many other things planned, which are still kind of a surprise. And I want to point you to Reacticon coming up. We'll have a full day focused on Hyvä and the whole Hyvä ecosystem. So we'll have many announcements coming up there. That's in about 4 weeks, I think. OK. And the results are very satisfactory. That's basically why I decided, yeah, this is awesome. I really want to be part of this. Across the board, all the people who have been working with Hyvä so far have recorded significantly shorter project build times, which means all the service integrators can really compete much better with all the others, right? I mean, it's kind of amazing, and it's always hard to give out numbers because obviously we're still pretty early on. It's just been launched publicly as an available product in February, right? But everybody that I've talked to so far who built a Hyvä site will build more in future. Right? It's a real game changer there. And overall, not every developer is completely in love with the stack, but every developer that I've talked to says, yeah, you know, it's either awesome or it's good enough, because it really just works and the results are great. More specifically, you don't have to optimize and spend weeks trying to kind of reach the upper end of what's possible if where you start is the upper end, right? I don't know how much money you earned optimizing sites. I earned a lot with Luma. It kind of hurts to admit it, right? But with Hyvä, that money's gone. But instead, I can build new stuff, which is kind of awesome, right? I really enjoy working with something that helps me rather than me having to fight against the front-end framework there, right? I feel lifted up by it instead of held back by it. Instead of feeling embarrassed talking about it, I'm like, yeah, it just works this way. It's awesome. It's really nice. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, I'll be around. Willem is here. You can reach me on Twitter, email, whatever. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, jump on board. Give it a try. I'm pretty sure you'll love it. Thank you.
Thanks, Vinai. Waiting for Ivan. We have some time for questions. So if you have any questions, just it's kind of like a meetup style. So it's a good time to ask difficult questions. Vinai is here. Also, Willem is here.
Here. Good person for questions. Karen. One moment. Let's use a microphone so the people online can hear.
Hello. Just in terms of adoption, can you just give us some numbers of like roughly around like how many kind of agencies using it,
Sure.
which locales, and then the tech partner side as well?
I don't have real concrete numbers. Maybe Willem knows most, but I know we have a couple of hundred agencies now building sites. We have over 1,000 members in our Slack right now. So those would be if a merchant buys a license or an agency buys a license for a merchant, then they get access and can invite their team members to the Slack too, right? So this, I don't know, 1,000, 50,000, 100 people in the Slack or whatever. It's growing all the time. Those are basically the service integrators and the people working with Hyvä in there. What was the other question? So numbers of integrators using it, agencies?
The tech partners.
Tech partners. We have a number of so who's tech partner? Yeah. Well, we have a number of extension providers who are in contact with us and are just really pumping out one compatibility module after the other for their extensions. And obviously, for the bigger extension providers, it's a bigger investment to do that. But naturally, the smaller ones took the chance and took the charge there right now. But we can see already that there's a high demand for the big extension pool of the bigger providers. So sooner or later, I'm pretty sure they'll also start providing compatibility modules or native compatibility out of the box. I must say, I'm not sure about other providers. We do have, I don't know, to be honest. Willem, maybe you can chime in there.
Yeah, there's a few extension vendors that indeed are creating native Hyvä modules. For some of the bigger ones,
other like payment
other
providers and such, right? That was what Karen was aiming for, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely interest there, and we're talking to, for example, payment providers because we're building a checkout with a payment provider, payment services integrated, and we're talking to the payment providers to help build those integrations. We're very close to releasing the first version of the React checkout that we have, and there's 3 payment methods integrated there when we launch. That's probably in 2 weeks. Well, other PSPs reached out and they want to build integrations. So they're just waiting for us to release the 1.0 version. Hosting providers are definitely interested because this gives them a path to provide hosting opposed to new solutions that are distributed over microservices and SaaS solutions. So for them, Magento having a viable path, keeping using on-premise and PHP is very interesting to them.
There's one more thing I would like to add to that. Thanks for chiming in there. Caught me off guard there, and I like it. But in the meantime, it's also possible to use the Luma checkout with Hyvä. So any customizations there, any shipping extensions, any integrations that hook into the checkout that are a bit more complex. And there are many of those kind of customizations because, again, the flexibility of Magento as part of its power can actually still just use the Luma checkout and work out of the box, which means only that little part for the checkout needs to be styled using the traditional Luma approach, and the rest of the site doesn't have to be styled and can use the Alpine stack. So that's what actually most of the implementations use so far. So Hyvä site, Luma checkout.
So the interesting thing there is that we have this Luma fallback mechanism where you can point at any controller in your Magento site and it will use the Luma version. So if you have something super custom with a lot of jQuery and the merchant doesn't want to spend the budget initially to have to completely refactor, you can do the whole site on Hyvä except for this one product page or just the card, because the card is heavily customized, and that works completely in union with Hyvä and Luma. You can use them side by side on different pages. And that's also why we partnered with One Step Checkout, because they have an amazing product that's also much more optimized performance-wise than default Luma checkout. And we see a bunch of stores being launched now with One Step Checkout on top of Hyvä.
Okay, I think time's up, so let's try to keep the schedule. Catch me later if you have more questions.
Sorry, I have one more question from online Hopin platform, from Michał. The question is, why not Vue.js? If Alpine.js is similar to Vue, then why not use Vue community to make Hyvä learning curve smaller?
Oh, good question. First of all, the learning curve isn't really smaller. I think moving from Vue.js to Alpine.js is like a zero learning curve, literally. And using the virtual DOM comes with a cost. And Alpine.js just is a lot more lightweight because it's kind of like Vue.js without the virtual DOM. So not as much JavaScript has to be loaded into the page there. It's quicker. The results are better, especially if Vue shines in a different area if you have a really complex UI to build, like for example, a checkout, right? But for a normal product page, there's no benefit in using Vue. So there, Alpine.js is a better choice. Okay.
Vinai, thank you
question.
very much. Thanks.